How did you pivot at the bottom?
I had 2.5 kids. My wife at the time was pregnant with our third kid, and I bought off of the paper worth that I had, that the value of my company was high, and I bought a waterfront property, a shitty house on the best block, classic real estate 101, on the best block in Old Greenwich, Connecticut, and literally like the week I closed, everything blew up, and I was, fell off a cliff, and I basically was broke. I went next door to a guy, hedge fund guy, that was building a McMansion, as they call it, right? It wasn't the owner. The owner was in Florida somewhere. It was the builder guy. So the builder guy, I'd bring him coffee, I'd bring him beer at the end of the day. I finally said, put me to work. Treat me like an apprentice. Just have me do stupid shit. Don't pay me. So he had me measuring for tile, had me measuring for doors, counting doors, did that for like 3 months. And I was like, I can do this. I like this. It's fun. So I borrowed against my asset that I couldn't afford and bought another house in Greenwich, and I made like $300,000 on my first deal.
Welcome back to Confronting the Impossible. I have a very interesting guest that we just met off the record. Gentleman's name is Mark O'Brien from Mark O'Brien Real Estate. Mark, tell him what's going on. What's on your mind?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on.
My pleasure.
I'm here at the Real Deal, and one of your guys came up and said, "Hey, would you want to be on our podcast?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And we're walking over. I said, "What's it about?" He goes, "Basically bankruptcy." He said, "What do I look like?" We do a little more than that. We do a lot of litigation. Do a lot of structuring of transactions in real estate. So, the premise of Confronting the Impossible is really a entrepreneur's journey in that entrepreneur's life about their difficulties and challenges of becoming a better person. And I think that in business, you're always on a personal journey. I think everything that we do, we develop character in. And you seem like a very interesting guy. You have a very big following. And tell us about your story. Well, it is funny when your guy said about bankruptcy, I was like, I can definitely talk to that, even though
Tell me about that. Tell me about your personal story.
Yeah, I mean, look, so I'm in real estate for pretty much my whole career, but I spent 15 years owning and running an executive search business, headhunting, consulting.
Wow.
And I hated it. So I hated my life, but it was very lucrative. I had an office on 57th and 7th, right across from Carnegie Hall.
Nice.
I played basketball every day at the New York Athletic Club, and it was lucrative. It was my own, but I hated it. I just was not happy. So I rolled it in. It was 1999. I started it in like the 80s, and around 1999, the .com thing started, and I thought, let me roll this into a .com, and I burned the boats, and I used the internet to aggregate people, companies that were looking to hire. So I would aggregate the job openings, and I would aggregate the people looking to work. It was all IT. Then I added a couple of components to it, like a bidding system and a matching system. So I had this whole thing online and changing the way things work. And it was brilliant. It was right. But I hit a bubble in 1999, 2000. The .com fell off a cliff for about 2 years, and I was on the wrong side of it. So I had venture capital behind me, people from CTOs from Merrill Lynch, Chase Bank, hearing my presentation, buying the system, or putting interest into the system and capital, and saying, you're going to be a very wealthy man. And, I was 38 years old or so, and it all fell off a cliff, and I lost everything.
You lost everything?
And I had 2.5 kids at the time. I had bought, it's kind of interesting because I wrote.
This was your executive search firm?
The executive search firm.
And you lost everything?
I lost everything because as they say, you burn the boats, and I was all in, and I was loving it. I was loving this new adventure called .com, whatever. We had billboards, we had signs on taxi cabs. If we weren't spending, what's your burn rate? That was the phrase of the time. What's your burn rate? If your burn wasn't high enough, you're not going to raise enough capital to really be a big player in this .com world. So
And you did all of it for executive search.
So did it all, yeah. And it was all IT, all computer programmers, developers. So I had guys on billing. I was also doing permanent placement, and then it all went away. And the interesting part of this story isn't the downfall, but I basically rode the .com bubble into the ground, and I jumped on the mortgage debacle that was building. Right, a debacle it doesn't start as a debacle.
How did you pivot? How did you pivot at the bottom?
So good question. So I had 2.5 kids. My wife at the time was pregnant with our third kid, and I bought off of the paper worth that I had. That the value of my company was high, and I bought a waterfront property, a shitty house on the best block, classic real estate 101, on the best block in Old Greenwich, Connecticut, and literally like the week I closed, everything blew up, and I was, fell off a cliff, and I basically was broke, living in Greenwich, Connecticut, in an expensive house that I could not afford. And I went next door to a hedge fund guy that was building a McMansion, as they call it, right? And I was like, this is cool. And it wasn't the owner. The owner was in Florida somewhere. It was the builder guy. So the builder guy, I'd bring him coffee, I'd bring him beer at the end of the day, and I'd just ask questions, 1,000 questions. I finally said, put me to work. Treat me like an apprentice. Just have me do stupid shit. Don't pay me. So he had me measuring for tile, had me measuring for doors, counting doors, did that for like 3 months. And I was like, I can do this. I like this. It's fun. So I borrowed against my asset that I couldn't afford and bought another house in Greenwich. So essentially, I made like 300,000 on my first deal. And I made a lot of mistakes, but the market was appreciating. So I was riding that. I also had a mentor.
How did you not lose your enthusiasm at the bottom?
Yeah, desperation. So people say, so I do some mentoring as well, right? So I mentor people because this happened when I was 40 years old. People were like, I'm 35 years old.
I'm 37.
I don't know what to do. I'm like, dude, you're always
You started over at 40.
I started this new career at 40. I had a great career up until then, but I was miserable. Now I've got a new career since I was 40. I'm now 63. And
you look great.
Thanks. And it's inversions. Blood to the head is the fountain of youth. Want to do some handstands?
No.
Okay. So it is an interesting story because, and some people are going to say, what do you think of the market? What do you think of the mayor? What do you think of the president? What do you think of politics? What I think? It's all bullshit. It's all just a cycle. It's all just a cycle. You go around and around. You could either have fun in this cycle called life, or you could be miserable. This guy is cool. I like his stuff because he's like, it is what it is. Get up at 5 a.m, go to the gym, work out, stay healthy, stay fit, keep moving, keep doing shit. You don't just give up.
You're 40 years old. You're starting over. You make some money out of desperation. And what happens next?
So I can do this. And it just so happened to be 1990. No, it was like 2000.
What is it that you could do? What is it you could do that you figured out you could do?
You're good, right? You're like really like...
I cross-examined 1,000 people in my life.
Yeah, right. So I think I'm good at putting teams together. I'm good at finding value.
So you followed your nature.
Yes. Yeah. And that's always been, it's funny. When my business was declining, one of the venture capital guys that invested in me said, you'll figure it out. You're good at figuring out how to make money. So I do think that I'm good at seeing value, but the only way I'm good at it is because I try, I experiment. I'm not afraid to make mistakes. I take big risks and I lose. And when I lose, I get back up and I fight harder and stronger. It's funny. I said to my girlfriend this morning, talking about stuff, and the venture capital guys are dangerous because they have 10 deals, and you're just one of their 10 deals. So they get you to put in sweat equity and friends and family round. So they get you to get your friends and family to invest in your company, and they're like tooting the horn, like we're going to take this and make this big. And they don't really care that much. I find that they don't really care because if they lose, it's 1 out of 10 in their portfolio. And ultimately they're making money because they only have to be right 1 out of 10 times. Meanwhile, my brother that invested lost 25 grand. My friend that invested lost 50 grand. And the friends and family lose. However, I lose too. I lost $1 million or a lot more than that. And but I learned valuable lessons. I learned how to fall down and get back up. I learned how to see. I saw around these corners that shit. I never thought of that. So when you're the principal and you're running the show and it doesn't work, it falls off a cliff, the value is what you learned. And if you can take that and use it, and now I see around corners. Now I know who's full of shit. Now I know all of the downfalls that you just can't calculate, like in building. I was late coming here today because I came from the building department because I got a stop work order. And I got a neighbor.
So what is it you do now?
Now I'm a developer. I build and I'm a broker. So I got a brokerage business because I always think it's important to understand value and understand, what neighborhoods, where do you want to be? What neighborhoods?
So where do you broker?
Manhattan and Brooklyn. So I'm always looking for deals in Brooklyn and Manhattan. Right now I have a townhouse on Bank Street that I'm restoring, a 3,000 square foot townhouse.
For
on
you
Bank
or for
Street.
someone?
For me, and then I'm going to sell
develop
it.
for others or for yourself?
Both. So I work as an owner's rep, and I also buy my own projects. So I buy something, I restore it, and then I put it on the market. Ideally, I live in it while I'm waiting for permits. 2.5 years, confronting the impossible. 2.5 years waiting for permits. It's bullshit. You know what the carry is on that? $5.5 million buy. I got to wait 2.5 years to get a permit. And people ask, why? Why is everything so expensive? The drywall systems that we have to bury, the engineering that goes into stuff, everything is overbuilt. And I'm not saying that's a mistake. That's all fine. But it's a lot of process, a lot of layers that cost the end user, the buyer, money. And then you have an access agreement. I got a neighbor that won't sign an access agreement, and now she's suing me because she saw a video of mine that she said that I was trying to avoid an access agreement. Because I say in the video, look, here's an interesting way to avoid an access agreement. I went to see a developer who's building on the Upper East Side, and he's trying to build inside the envelope. So he's got this steel structure that he drives in, then he builds his foundation inside the footing, so you don't have to build on your neighbor's footing, so you don't need an access agreement. I wasn't trying to avoid an access agreement. I was just trying to see what is the next latest and greatest way to avoid an access agreement. And it wasn't for me. It wasn't going to work on a 20-foot wide building. I need every inch of that 20 feet. If I have a 40-foot building, sure, can I sacrifice 6 inches here, 6 inches there? So people are nuts, and they're causing problems just because they can.
I have a question. Do you focus on multiple projects at once or one project at a time? Because you said you slept with your project.
Yeah, no, I have multiple projects going on at once, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is brownstones?
Brownstones.
Where?
Brooklyn and Manhattan. So I've got two in Brooklyn right now, one in Crown Heights, one in Fort Greene, and one in the West Village. I just finished a smaller project in the West Village.
Why do you stay in that lane? Why not higher or lower?
I do look higher and lower. I look in Bed-Stuy. I look at the next...
Meaning unit-wise. You said brown.
Yeah, okay, all right. No, interesting question. I don't really like, I call it spreadsheet building. I don't like to buy a big building and let's turn it into condos.
Why is that?
I like old stuff. I got an old Harley Davidson, an old truck. I'm old. I like taking care of old things and the memories. It just gets me out of bed in the morning. And it's also a lot more, I think, touchy-feely than
How did you get into house
condos.
flipping? How did you get into house flipping and developing?
Again, out of basically being in executive search and headhunting and rolling it into a .com and losing everything. And I borrowed against the house I lived in and bought a house, built it, and I did all modular. It was all modular construction because
you could not afford.
That I could not afford. And then
and you knew you couldn't afford it.
And the second house.
And you knew you couldn't afford it.
And I knew it. I couldn't afford it.
But you still did it.
It was a huge risk. If it went under, I would have lost everything. Personally, I already lost my business. I could have lost, a lot. It would have been ugly. But okay, so that's a good question. Like, what do you do then? You just keep going. And you find a way forward. And I just always do. I
have a question for you. You have north of about 400,000 followers. How did you develop that following?
doing stuff like this. I say that I'm
And
like,
how many years did you do it?
it's been 2 years.
2 years.
2 years. Yeah, but it is interesting. I started out.
Do you have an agency? Do you work with
I
someone?
do just recently. I now have a manager. But when I first started out, I thought I want to be, because I was doing a lot of brokerage, because I was still trying to figure out New York. I lived in New Zealand.
So you have your own brokerage.
Yeah, I have my own brokerage, the Mark O'Brien team. But I moved to New Zealand after I was riding high, building houses in Greenwich, Connecticut. And I took that first deal at $300,000. The second house I built, I made $1 million. It was like you would buy for $1 million, build for $1 million, and sell for $3 million. And essentially the profit was high. It ain't like that anymore. Certainly not the same ratio, a third.
How is it different?
Now, banking, financing, it's a very different market.
Do you invest your own cash?
So I use some of my own cash. I always have to have skin in the game, but I have an investor who's been great. I used to use banks, but now banks just don't want to lend like that. And
Ever had a foreclosure?
have I ever? No. Have I ever? I've bought foreclosures, but I have not
Been in a foreclosure?
No, I've never lost on real estate.
Those that are aspiring to have a social media presence, what are the attributes that are important that you need to have?
People always say, you always hear like, find your voice. Well, you got to find your voice. Okay, yeah, that's like impossible. What does that mean? It kind of means just keep being yourself, and don't try to be somebody that you're not. I always say that I'm a bit of the underbelly of brokerage and development. I like brownstones. I like small deals, but so I get a couple of small deals at a time. I like brokerage. I like seeing what other people are doing, and I like getting my hands dirty. And I work. And people like that. People like my trade.
Married, have kids?
Divorced, 5 kids from the same ex-wife.
How long were you married for?
13 years. I was killing it in Greenwich, Connecticut, building homes, having fun. I was at every one of my kids' school events, teacher parent conferences.
So what happened?
And then it's like, let's do something fun and different. Let's move we looked at Peru, Italy, Vancouver, and New Zealand. And we moved to New Zealand. Just like that, just to have fun. My ex had a little more fun than I did, so we got divorced. And then I came back to my knitting. People also would say, like, why would you ever move back to New York after living in New Zealand for 10 years? I came running back to New York.
Why is that?
New Zealand.
What's so great about New York?
New York has everything. It just really does. And it even has the beauty of New Zealand. New Zealand is kind of one-dimensional. It's beautiful, but it's just that. It's just beautiful. It's not much history, not much culture. New York has all of it, right?
Any word from the wise about entrepreneurs starting their own businesses?
JFDI. I say that all the time. Just fucking do it. Like there's no better time. I was 40 years old, stressed out. I do think desperation is a big motivator, and I ain't got no other choice. So you make it happen. You make it work. You get up every day and you work hard. Like this guy gets up. I'm not going to the gym at 5 a.m., but I'm on the phone. I'm making calls. I'm doing emails. I'm looking at my spreadsheet. But being on the job and get your hands dirty. Don't be afraid to get out there and make it happen, and never, ever give up.
Well, Mark, it was very nice to meet you.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much for defining your impossible on the Confronting the Impossible.
No,
We'll see you soon.
No, it's
Thank
a good
you.
topic.
Thank you.